Hi, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to my weekly podcast about spirituality, love, death, devotion, and waking up while living in a messy world. The Satsang with Shambhavi podcast is recorded live each week with students of our nonprofit community, Jayakula. For more information and to find out about attending a satsang, visit jayakula.org. Thanks for listening. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. So I wanted to start this afternoon with a story that I've told before, but I'll elaborate on and kind of play a little game with it. This is a story that is told in zendos. It's from the Zen tradition. And you might remember it. So everyone's sitting in the zendo doing open-eyed meditation, shikantaza. And you know, if you've ever been in a zendo, they're very organized. They have these little platforms facing each other with black zabutons and black cushions, everything very perfectly arranged. Like they literally measure the distance between the cushions and everything. It's very nice in there, actually. And then at the far end, facing everybody, is the teacher. And then as people they're just sitting, or maybe they're sitting like this, I don't know exactly how to sit. And then if it's a traditional zendo, at some point or another, the master might get up and walk around and maybe like hit people with a stick to keep them from falling out of presence. So the story is this situation, this scene, and the master is walking around with the stick, and he's whacking the people that need to get whacked. And there's this one guy who's just like this, sitting on his cushion like this. And the teacher comes up and stands in front of him, and the guy looks up and he goes, "Oh, it's you," like this. And so then after the meditation session, some of the other students excitedly gather around, very officiously and self-importantly, gather around the master and say, "He was so rude to you, and, he was sleeping." And the master just said, "He's the only one that gets it." So why was he the only one that gets it?
Because it's about relaxation and naturalness.
Yep. But it's not about sloth.
No.
Right.
He wasn't pretending to be perfect student.
He wasn't pretending anything. Can anybody say any more about that?
He's being honest.
Mm-hmm. He's being honest. What do you think, assuming that the teacher was a good teacher and knew that the student wasn't just like, the lazy bones, knew that the student actually got something, he's the only one that gets it. What did he get? What was it that the student had understood from their sadhana that they then felt so relaxed that they could sleep in front of the teacher and not be embarrassed or nervous about it?
It seems like he was not making the teacher special or something.
Mm-hmm.
Very hard, basically.
Yeah. So maybe he's realized something about the equality of himself with the teacher.
The equality of all phenomena.
Maybe. Or maybe just that there was nothing special about every situation is magical and wonderful, but no situation is special. Or maybe he realized that nothing ever happened, so sleeping or not sleeping is the same. He could have had a very profound realization in order to be able to sleep in front of the teacher in the zendo. So then, what do you imagine? Let's say there was 9 students in there, and then this guy, the 10th. Because you'd always have an even number, because it'd be 5 cushions on one side and 5 on the other. So there's 9 students plus the 10th, this guy who fell asleep. What are the other 9 students thinking as they're sitting there in the center?
Judging.
Comparing.
Yeah, so imagine you're then, what are you saying in your head as you're sitting there meditating?
I'm a better student.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm a better student than him. Because I'm... What other kinds of thoughts might be?
It's not fair, teacher doesn't know, there's like so many different narratives.
Teacher doesn't know.
Yeah.
Right. Teacher's not up to snuff.
Yeah, it's like,
Isn't
what the
the
hell's
teacher-
teacher doing?
Yeah, isn't the
How's the
teacher
teacher
gonna,
doing?
isn't the teacher going to do something about that?
Mm-hmm.
Or like my efforts to be perfect aren't working.
Mm-hmm.
Basically.
Right. Why did he hit everyone else and not that guy who's sleeping? How come I got hit? That guy's sleeping.
I'm not trying to be perfect.
And I'm trying to be perfect, but I still got whacked with a stick.
Getting no recognition for my perfection.
Yes. What else might people have been thinking sitting?
Just so disruptive to sleep when we're supposed to be meditating.
Yeah.
Out of the program.
Get on the program.
But also maybe they thought that they fooled the teacher because,
Mhm.
you know, doing, you know.
Right. When the teacher says he's the only one who gets it, you might be thinking, the teacher doesn't get it. I get it, but the teacher doesn't get it. Right? You're not supposed to sleep. That's not meditation. The teacher doesn't know what they're doing. I would be a better teacher. Maybe someone's sitting there thinking, those are all great options, the ones you put up. Maybe someone's sitting there imagining themselves with a stick in their hand and how great they would look with that stick. Maybe they would like wield it more elegantly than the teacher they're thinking. What other kinds of thoughts are people having?
Maybe I should try sleeping.
Maybe I should try sleeping.
If that guy knows something, then maybe I should try it.
Yeah, let me do it. I'm trying to look alert. Maybe I should look like I'm sleeping, and that'll do it. And then I'll get the teacher's praise. Maybe someone's thinking, why is the teacher still using that stick? That is so not appropriate for modern times. We really need to stop doing things like that. Or maybe someone's thinking, they say that, you know, hitting people with a stick is compassionate, but I don't see any compassion there. I think the teacher's just a megalomaniac. So, I'm sure you recognize yourself in some of these things. Which is one of the reasons why when we do practice together, especially meditation, I sit in the back of the room. Whatever competitiveness there is or desire to look a certain way, at least you aren't aware of me looking at you. You don't. All of my teachers always sat in the front of the room when doing meditation with us. And, you know, they'd be there like... and everyone would be so uncomfortable performing this and that, trying to sneak little wiggles. And, you know, at least if I'm in the back of the room, you can be somewhat more relaxed, which is, you know, the point, to be relaxed.
It's amazing how performative sitting still with your eyes can be.
It's the ultimate.
So if you have these kinds of thoughts, they're really thought feelings, they're not just thoughts. Let's say that you're actually a serious student of some tradition or another. How should you relate to these thoughts? What should you do about them or not do about them? How will you work with these kinds of feelings sometimes?
Try not to be completely carried away. Observe them with a little distance.
Mm-hmm.
And try to feel how it feels to have those thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Try to feel how it feels?
Yeah, to see if there's anxiety around it or strife.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, there's an indication.
To look at the life process and see how that student and us are on the same continuum at different places, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
I always really like the idea that you can just sort of sidestep them. You don't get embroiled in them. You don't pay too much attention to them. You just like, and then try to get back to what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You come back to
Yeah.
naturalness and presence
Yeah.
or whatever that
It's
is.
like,
Yeah.
oh, that thing happened. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's more forceful than just coming back, but I think the instruction is to gently come back.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, but what if we're not there yet? You know, what if we are pretty caught up in those thoughts and feelings? I mean, look, these people sat through, you know, an hour of shikantaza, and after they were done, ran up and complained to the teacher about the student. You know, what kind of practice was that? Clearly, they were not sidestepping anything. They were taking their thoughts about the student and the teacher's behavior very, very seriously. So they thought that they had a legitimate complaint.
Seems like there must be some kind of chugging engine going on during that complaint.
Mm-hmm.
Like discerning what is legitimate complaint and what is your chugging engine.
Mm-hmm.
I think just remembering that you're there for yourself and it doesn't really matter what anyone else is doing.
That's right. You're there for yourself. You're there to get out of having complaints about things. You're there to divest yourself of having serious complaints about things. So the idea that we would attribute our condition to what somebody else did is what you need to break that link between what you're feeling and what you're thinking and what someone else is doing. This is the fundamental break that has to happen before you can do something more elegant like sidestep. You have to, in a sense, become convinced that your feelings are not being caused by somebody else. That everyone in that room, that's why I said, let's imagine what those 9 people are thinking and feeling, many different things, right? Not everybody is having the same response to that situation. Maybe someone's thinking, I'm not as good as this student who just fell asleep. I'll never be that relaxed. People are having very many different responses. So that in and of itself is, at least, in logical terms, proof that there is not a cause and effect here. There is not one thing that's causing a certain response. There are many, many responses to the same circumstance. So that lets us know, if we're willing to go there, which some people are not willing to go there yet, but if we're willing to go there, that the circumstance is not causing our response. The particular way in which we respond is our karmic flavor, or unkarmic flavor if we happen to be outside of that. Before we can really proceed, the seriousness with which we take our responses to things as like seriously being somebody else's fault or on somebody else's plate or etc., that link needs to be unlinked. And then we can start working with things in more sophisticated ways. And this is always true. When we have any circumstance, there's myriad, if not infinite, responses to that one circumstance. So there's no necessary relationship between a circumstance and a response. The response is always because you have a unique dimension. It's your unique dimension responding to that in your own unique way. Now, sometimes our responses aren't so unique because our cultures and our families and even our nations and our ancestors and our genes are telling us that we should respond a certain way to a certain situation. For instance, if we're being an ordinary mind, if someone cuts you off on the freeway or does something unfair to you or whatever, you are conditioned to become angry at that. There's no necessary relationship between those things and you getting angry, but we're very conditioned to become angry when we think something is unfair. Who's in prison then? Right? If every time something isn't up to snuff in terms of your ideas of fairness, every time you get angry and feel put upon and you've been done wrong, who's in prison then? Not the person who cut you off on the freeway. They're on their merry way. So part of how we begin to extricate ourselves from these conditioned responses and also from taking our responses to things too seriously is when we see that there's no necessary relationship between what happens in our response to it, and also when we see that our conditioned responses really have us imprisoned, that they are burdens to us. I mean, you can go on and on about how I have a right to feel this and I have a right to feel that, but they're basically just your rights in prison. You get put in the jail cell and here's your rights as a prisoner. So understanding that our habitual responses to things are imprisoning us, we develop more of a desire not to be imprisoned by those things. Our desire for freedom becomes greater. What would it be like to be free of the compulsion to respond to things in a certain way? And of course, when we're working with a teacher, like in the story, our job is to become aware of our habitual responses and to try to work with them with the tools of whatever tradition we happen to be in. If we are working with teachers and we still maintain that we have a right to feel this and a right to feel that and a right to feel the other thing, and it's the teacher's fault or the other student's fault or the fault of some circumstance, then we're really not being in the practice. It's not this kind of tradition anyway. And then what happens if, for instance, in the Zendo, I don't really know because I've never been in a Zen tradition. I don't really know how prevalent it is to still hit people with sticks. I don't really know how often that still happens. But let's say there's somebody sitting in that room who really just is convinced that this practice should be stopped. But the teacher just goes on their merry way, hitting people with sticks. What should that person do?
Leave.
This is a more mature approach. And there's also other things that happen, as we know, in spiritual communities where a lot worse things are happening than people getting hit with a stick during meditation. The general advice is you're working with yourself, with the teacher as a mirror and a guide and a friend on the path. And, you know, if something happens that you just cannot digest, you know, it's not within you to bring that onto the path, whatever it is. I mean, to me, if I were sitting in a Zendo with someone hitting people with sticks, that wouldn't be a big deal to me, but it might be a big deal to somebody else. So if there's something there that you just can't digest, you know, the general advice is leave. But then what if some things are happening like have happened, children being abused or other very serious things happen? Of course, then you might decide to call the police or not just go off quietly without saying anything. In any case, the point is that what is really happening here is that we are in a circumstance where we can better see what our habitual responses are and then work with them in various ways. Now in the Zendo, even if someone is not able to just kind of sidestep and go back into presence, you can do something much simpler, which is just remind yourself, I'm a person in a room sitting on a cushion. Just get back to your very, very simple situation, experiencing that with all of your senses. It doesn't have to be so fancy. Right? It can just be, that's something that everybody can do. But again, before you can do that, you still have to think it's worth doing. And the only way you can think it's worth doing is if you've already recognized that your habitual responses to things are what are imprisoning you. If you're not convinced of that, then you won't think that there's any reason to try to get out of those things. You'll try to resolve those feelings in other ways, like the students did, going to the teacher and complaining. You know, if you are still thinking that something's wrong, you know, something's wrong with this circumstance, and I'm justified in my feelings about it, then you are not even going to take the step of just have a person sitting on a cushion in the room. You're going to do exactly what those students did. And that's not working with the practice. That's just an ordinary thing. Right? Something happens you don't like and you complain about it. So that's not taking things onto the path.